They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
We've been waiting 3 seasons for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this week we have the second most important storyline in all of Legion history, and it's come up this week. You guys are in luck.
Adventure Comics number 340, Computo the Conqueror. Published January 1966. Written by Jerry Siegel with art by Kurt Swan. Brainiac 5's newest creation turns on its master, and the Legion may not survive the reign of Computo.
This is where it all comes together.
This is where it all comes together, man. I mean, since what? We're now, 15 years into the Legion? Probably not 15 years. Probably
not
only
15, maybe 6.
Maybe 6 years into the Legion. And the team is finally solidified. People have their favorites. In fact, in one of the back issues, or one of the letters pages in one of the issues, they're talking about how great it was for people to come up with the idea of their favorite Legion member. And this is the point where, yes, before when Lightning Lad died, everything felt big and important. This week, though, in these 2 issues, Adventure Comics number 340 and 341, we get, there's shock, there's awe, there is shenanigans, there is, just defining moments that go on throughout each and every character. And it really starts off with the moment that Brainiac becomes the ever-loving D-hole that he's known for.
And it's interesting here because Brainiac being crabby and cruel and dismissive and out of sorts is played as a sign that there's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, eventually this will become his basically default characterization. But this is the first real appearance of that arrogant Brainiac 5 who doesn't have time for his stupid pals and whatever it is that they want to do.
Do you really think that it's Brainiac is too important for everyone else? Or is it, I'm Brainiac, I've got the biggest intellectual mind in the universe, and I need to solve this, and this is really important. This is life and death stuff, so forgive me if I'm short with you. I just have a lot of work to do.
He does not say, forgive me if I'm short with you.
No.
He says, go away.
Again, go away, 3 words. Forgive me if I'm short with you, but I'm busy at the moment. Takes up a lot of computing power that he could use.
Shove off.
But then, so he is very, flippant and dismissive of people at the beginning of this issue because he is working on something important. He's working on Computo, which we'll get to in a moment. But I wonder if the results of Computo's actions over the course of these 2 issues doesn't have some kind of a psychological impact on Brainiac, or even when, at some point, when Computo grabs Brainiac and makes him the brain of his computer. I don't understand what's going on with that part, but if somehow his interactions with Computo have made him lose part of himself or driven him into that part of that stage or that mentalness of, I have failed, I need to be on alert at all times, I don't have time to relax, therefore I'm on edge all the time and I'm short with people all the time.
That is it's a valid read because this is, and it gets bigger and bigger and it snowballs as years go on. This is Brainiac's biggest mistake. This is the first moment where Brainiac shows that he is in fact fallible and can make a vast mistake like this. And later on down the line, even as late as the 1990s, we will see references to, Brainiac created Computo. Can we even trust him?
Right. And Computo is the central focus of this. Computo is this giant 5-story robot that Brainiac cobbles together out of bits of refrigerator parts and old Deep Space Nine and Lost in Space components.
No, and he has the best, and he has the greatest components that the United Planets, put a footnote on that for a moment, that the United Planets can provide, the best things that he can find. And he says, I'm going to create the perfect computing machine, and I'm going to make it 50 feet tall with giant cables and tank treads and electrifying weapons to destroy everything in sight.
Now,
It's a bad plan.
to be fair, tank treads are a preferred means of, universal movement. We have put treads like that on rover missions to Mars so that these things can get around over all of the rough terrain. Brainiac comes from a society of logical thinkers, so maybe aesthetics and the beauty of aesthetics doesn't compute, to borrow a phrase, when he's building this robot, and he's looking more over function over form.
Well, and bear in mind, this is 1966. Computers are room-sized UNIVAC units, giant, massive messes of components that are just long banks of tapes and turning and all of these things. And to say that this is Computo, he is a walking computer, and having him be the size, 50 feet tall, the size of a small truck or a building or a room, makes perfect sense. That's what a computer is in 1966, at least, in the pop culture expectation, in the mind's eye of the people who are going to be reading this. You're going to think of the UNIVACs, and you're going to be thinking of the other UNIVACs.
I'm curious. I really am curious, because what ends up happening is Computo is obsessed with gaining as much knowledge as he can. So he runs through the entire encyclopedia, which, to be frank, is very quaint in this issue, considering where we're at today.
Books. They're actual books.
And what ends up happening is Brainiac tries to introduce emotion to Computo, and Computo rejects that notion and says that's a flaw. Therefore, all humans must be destroyed. And
we are nomad.
Well, not only just nomad, but I mean, he builds a whole army of robots that look just like him. And even though we may be talking about the Forbin Project, or we may be talking about AI run amok, the first thing when all of that army of robots start rolling out and causing death and destruction in the streets is the Daleks.
Yes, and the Daleks would have been a huge deal in 1966 in certain parts of the world.
Well, yes, definitely in Europe. That's why when we look at kind of the bunch of robots and different things that have appeared in comics, I mean, the Metal Men came out in 1962. The Daleks came out in 1963, though by 1966, I don't think Doctor Who would have reached the United States. Dr. T.O. Morrow first appeared in The Flash 143 in 1964. The Android Master, who appears in this book, is 1966. So to see, and I didn't go back and look and see when the Forbin Project, the book came out. The movie came out in 1970s. And the Forbin Project, or as I call it, the Forbidden Project, is all about the first time that the world plugs in a supercomputer. And it's the first sentient AI, and basically, after a few minutes of being plugged in, it's like, oh, you people are idiots. I'm going to take control of this entire planet, and you will do as I say for your own safety, or else I will blow everything up and you will all be dead.
Yeah, Colossus, the source material, came out in 1966.
Yeah, so it would have come out in this same year, which, again...
that same zeitgeist.
Yeah, when we were talking about Goldfinger and Starfinger a couple of episodes ago, I can understand that, James Bond would be super popular, but I don't think Colossus would have been that rampant of a runaway hit. Maybe, considering that this is Jerry Siegel, and he likes to borrow and claim things of his own that he has no business with.
And Jerry Siegel
he
is
may
also
have read
a
the book and put it in.
Guy.
True, that's true. Here's the thing, though. That I guess kind of makes sense, because you do have to have a story, right? You have to get from point A to point B, and you have to have a robot run amok. Where's Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics? I mean, that stuff came out in 1942. And it was included in the 1950s collection, iRobot.
Brainiac is from Kolu, which is a different planet where Dr. Asimov's work hasn't quite reached yet.
What are the 3 Laws of Robotics, Matthew?
The first law... do not talk about the first law of robotics. The second law, if it's your first robot, you have to take over the world. And the third law is loser buys drinks, I think.
Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come into harm.
To be injured, correct.
Number 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law, meaning I can't order the robot to go kill somebody.
Right.
Rule number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first and second laws. So the robot can't save itself if it means that a human's going to die in its place. that kind of
It
stuff.
can't
But
sacrifice a human to save itself, which means that Computo breaks all 3 rules by the end of these 2 issues.
by the end of the first act in this in the first issue, he has done this. I mean, he's
Yep.
run amok, literally runs amok, and he realizes that he needs to stop the Legionnaires, and so he begins capturing them and putting them inside the robots and attaching their heads to these cables. And I don't know if they're sucking out their memories or what it is.
He's using their brain as storage. He's basically
Ah.
using your brain as an additional processor.
Well, and that's why I go back to, at this moment, Brainiac has lost something or has been imprinted upon by Computo, and that's why he's such a pill going forward. So he captures a bunch of these Legion members,
Yep.
Including Triplicate Girl,
Yes.
and then he devises a way of turning off their superpowers, which, again, how do you turn off a superpower? We can see negating something that weakens a superpower, like kryptonite or lead in the case of Mon-El and Superboy.
Right.
We have seen some, I guess, genetic manipulation when it comes to Bouncing Boy to counter the effects of an allergic reaction to drinking the secret formula. But to turn off someone's power, you're manipulating them on a genetic level, which is pretty impressive.
Well, if you look at, we can reverse engineer the expectation that in the DC universe, there is a metagene. We've seen that the metagene can, in fact, be blocked or turned off.
Right.
Or temporarily, your access to that.
Yeah, like a beta blocker.
Off. Sure. Or like, when they talk about, oh no, Barry cannot access the Speed Force. He cannot be the Flash. If you think of the superheroes as conduits for their power, be that power shape-shifting or telepathy or bouncelcating, then if you somehow close the channel, if you shut off the dam, as it would be, you have that moment where, oh no, they have no power. Also, it's the Legion. Their powers are really, their powers are in fact just kind of plot devices to be used and not used as necessary.
I guess my point is, yes, we can have things like pills that will get rid of temporarily, relieve the symptoms of like a hay fever or a headache, or, if you have a bad part of your body that you have to take a medication for, like a thyroid or gallbladder or something like that. You can take something to improve something or to turn it off. But when we're talking about the entire scope of the human genome, we're just barely cracking the surface of that thing, trying to figure out how can we stop cancer. Cancer is like your body run amok.
Right.
And we have the ability to turn off that power. Here is an AI that's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to examine this guy that eats all metal or all matter. And I'm going to turn off his ability to eat all matter. So the next time he bites into a steel cube, he goes, ow, my teeth.
I do love the fact that the splash for this issue has Tencel biting a wall and going, oh, biting this piece of steel hurt. And I'm just like, you couldn't tell before you bit down at full speed that your powers were not working, really?
When I look at Computo, the one thing that strikes me, and I don't know if this was the inspiration for later or if this is such a generic looking, I know it's Kurt Swan, but it's such a generic looking robot that is what inspired, characters like Herbie, or I don't know if you remember that robot in the 80s that you could program. Do you remember that thing where it's like you could say move forward so many spaces, then turn right and go forward so many spaces, and then turn left again, and then open the refrigerator and bring me a beer, you stupid robot?
Yes. I can't remember what it was called, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure, because to me, when I see this vision of Computo, that stupid 80s robot, which never worked for anybody that I ever knew, just pops into my head.
You know what I see?
What do you see?
The Fisher-Price telephone on a string.
Oh,
that my sister had, with the big rubbery head and the big bulging eyes and the freakiness. But I think it's interesting that their idea of a computer looks like a giant erector set. Even when he upgrades to the most state-of-the-art weaponry and the big rubbery head, he still looks like he was put together.
When he upgrades to Dalek Prime or whatever the head Dalek is.
I have determined the clubhouse is deserted.
I challenge anyone to read Computo the Conqueror or the Weirdo Legionnaire and not see what Computo is doing and not think Daleks.
Yeah. And I swear that I cannot say that any of the creators know anything about Doctor Who circa 1966. But you can look at what's happening in pop culture in the time, and you can look at, I mean, this is post World War II. This is the point where automation is becoming a huge deal, and people being technologically replaced is becoming, it's part of society. Your job is going away. They're replacing you with a machine. And the advent of these computers and people saying, well, someday computers will take us to the moon. Someday computers will take us here and there and run our cars and drive us around. And someday we'll be carrying small computers in our pockets that we can use to communicate with each other, but only a few characters at a time because we're all idiots. It's something that when you really break this down, it's just that fear of change, that fear of technology, that fear of being replaced. The humanity is entirely out of it, and you have a machine that can think and feel and talk like a human, but it doesn't have our mercy. And now it has laser beams.
And it has Triplicate Girl.
It does. And there is a huge spoiler on the cover of 340, by the way.
Why? What does it remind me and our listeners again? What does the cover say?
The cover of 340 shows Computo in his evolved form destroying Triplicate Girl and saying, I'm destroying Triplicate Girl. And normally I would blow that off as, oh, it's one of those moments where they're doing a scary, scary cover and we're going to go inside and see that that's not the case. But this issue, at the very second to last panel of the Legion story, you see him go, ha ha, observe, I have annihilated her. And then the Legionnaires are like, wait, what?
And we'll get into, because I'm pretty sure that's the opening bits of the second issue. Because as I'm writing my notes down, I'm like, holy crap, Computo just decimated Triplicate Girl.
Yeah, it repeats. They do the Jerry Siegel as we saw before.
So this is issue 340. Not only does it have this crazy robot bent on destroying civilization, it has what I think is a very, I don't want to say kid-friendly, but let's say kid-friendly. It has a very kid-friendly introduction of the dangers of AI run amok. Well, I don't know. I don't want to say technology because technology has always served the Legion and the Legion and the United Planets, which we also need to talk about. Technology is part of this future. What this is really saying is, yes, technology is great, but you got to be aware of when technology starts to become smarter than we are, because that's when it's going to cause problems. And I don't necessarily buy into that. I mean, it's always something to be afraid of. I mean, and that's what we're always afraid of, something that's bigger and better and badder than us. And so when you look at AI that can compute things faster than we can imagine, then I think people get into this fear of the AI is going to take over, or like the nanites are going to replicate themselves, and we'll all be drowning in gray ooze by the end of this show.
Yeah, thanks, Wesley Crusher.
But I really think that this is interesting because it does kind of a primer almost of here's what can happen when you're not careful with AI or technology.
Agreed, and it's interesting that Computo, when they talk about he's a computer, what we keep seeing are he's a robot. He's at one point he actually infiltrates the clubhouse and computerizes the clubhouse, which means it has robot legs and it gets up and walks around and follows his commands.
Which is just bizarre.
Right, but I love that robot clubhouse walking around. And then you look at the clubhouse and you're like, that's not the normal shape and size of the clubhouse.
No, it's not.
It's not to mention, the fact that the clubhouse has always been a freakish thing that cannot make sense in the universe. But a mobile computer in this case to them means a robot. It means the same thing. But we've talked about the repeated appearances of the science police captain with the bubble helmet that he got at his kid's birthday party, made from balloons. This issue has another first on that front.
Right.
They've recently started calling them the science police. This issue 340 features the first use of what would become the standard, the United Planets.
So, which comes first? United Planets in the Legion of Superheroes, or the United Federation of Planets in Star Trek?
Well, this comic, Adventure Comics number 340, has a street date of January 1966.
So it came out in November.
It would put it on the
65.
stands in late 65.
Yeah.
But also, those street dates were very, very flexible. The
Mhm.
first episode of Star Trek, which I believe the first aired episode was The Man Trap, would have aired in the fall of 66, I want to say. Let's see, hang on. The Man Trap is the first episode of Star Trek. Yes. Ha! My powers.
September of
Still
66.
September of 66, which would have been the fall season.
Mhm.
So this predates Star Trek. And remember, United Federation of Planets was not used immediately in Star Trek. It actually popped up halfway through season 1 and became the standard in season 2. So the United Planets do predate the United Federation of Planets by a relatively wide margin in terms of pop culture speak anyway.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/major spoilers.
So in the Bits of Legionnaire business column, I've been watching closely to see whether we see any characters that actually end up getting used, because I want to say either last issue or the issue before, somebody suggested Color Kid.
Right.
Which came into this. This issue has a sort of kind of minor and a super, super minor couple of characters show up. Tommy Myers of Lone Star, Texas suggests Chemical Kid.
Yeah.
Who can produce any chemical or mixture of chemicals via rays from his eyes. And not too long down the line, a couple of years from now, we're going to see a Legionnaire introduced called Chemical King.
Right.
Who basically has those powers. And later, many, many, many years later, like 50 years later, he will actually have been killed and replaced by another character from the same planet called Chemical Kid. But I think that Tommy gave them the impetus for what would become Chemical King, who will join the Legion later on with Timberwolf, oddly enough.
Well, don't forget some of these other fantastic suggestions in this issue, including Beam Boy.
Beam Boy! You can change into a beam!
Dr. Dick.
No.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Detector Dick. I think I like Dr. Dick better.
See,
because Detector Dick is just like, he has the power of detecting the plans of any evildoer on Earth. All right, well, so that's Sherlock Holmes.
Suction Lad, who has the power to turn anything to smoke and inhale it.
And don't forget Backwards Boy.
That's actually Yob's Draw Cab.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Okay.
They also, in this issue, Patrick Chup of Muskegon, Michigan, suggests Crystal Kid, who can change himself or anything else into unbreakable crystal. Crystal Kid does become a member of the Legion Academy way down the line. Crystal Kid, Bob Cohen, is a member of the Legion for about 8 minutes in Volume 4 during the crisis around the time of Black Dawn. So this all takes place during the 5-year gap.
Okay.
And when he came back to the team, they did not bring him back because, and this is true, because nobody liked him and he was a jerk.
Oh.
And this is a team that has Tenzil Kem. Trust me, I'm a senator, Tenzil Kem. And Crystal Kid is too much of a jerk. So you have to think that poor Crystal Kid is like the poster child for schmuck.
Oh man, poor guy.
All right.
Adventure Comics number 340, The Weirdo Legionnaire. Published February 1966. Written by Jerry Siegel with art by Kurt Swan. Tragedy strikes the future teens. A hero is lost. Will the galaxy follow?
Holy crap. Computo just decimates Triplicate Girl.
No!
This is pretty crazy.
It is, and it's pretty shocking because, again, 1966, comic book death is not as, I don't want to say cheap, but let's say cheap as it is.
And not overused, yeah, and
right,
predictable.
Yeah. Certainly not the first death in comics. The first death was probably 1941, which would have been the Comet in Pep Comics, but very much, I think, one of the most important deaths, certainly of the Silver Age, when Triplicate Girl gets killed, because really, these two issues kind of represent what the Legion is going to become. This is the point where all of that early installment weirdness is finally kind of fallen away, and we've lost our baby teeth, if you will. The husk has fallen away, and now the beautiful corn within, that is the Legion, has arrived with this big 2-part epic story that, unlike previous 2-parters, not mentioning any names, called Command Kid, is actually worth 2 issues.
Well, but so I guess here's the thing that I'm thinking here.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, if you are reading comics and you've been reading these particular heroes since their introduction, you've seen Lightning Lad die, you've seen Beast Boy die,
Beast Boy dying was again kind of a story, just a plot point.
Right, but you also see little swerves to say, oh no, here's another character who has died. Oh no, we're just fooling yous. And somebody else, we've seen this again and again and again. So I'm wondering if you get to Triplicate Girl and you're like, yeah, I mean, I wonder if kids reading this issue felt the same way then as we do now when they're like, we're killing Wolverine, and this time we mean it until 4 years from now when we bring him back.
I don't think they did. The main reason for that is that these books were actually aimed at children in that 7 to 12-year-old range. And there wasn't really an expectation of immortality.
Right.
I mean, yes, Lightning Lad did come back from the dead. Lightning Lad had his arm bitten off by the Super Moby Dick of space, but he's now got a robot arm.
Yes.
These things they have consequences, even if the consequences aren't as long-ranging as we would hope they are. But I don't think that kids in 66 are going to look at this and go, man, I know this is fake. This is totally fake, you guys.
Well, we'll get to the, oh man, this is totally fake with an asterisk here in just a moment. But I wonder, at what point does DC Comics, I mean, they're now officially DC Comics, they're not National Periodical
publication, yeah.
At what point do they realize, hey, there's a lot of IP value in things beyond Batman and Superman? And some people could argue they still haven't figured that out today. But at what point do you think that they're like, oh, wait a minute, Triplicate Girl is really important, or the Legion of Superheroes are really important. This is really important to us. And even these individual characters, even though there's, 25 of them currently in the Legion, at what point is it okay to kill these characters, and at which point do we have to continually fake that we're killing these characters only to reveal that it's a joke later on because someone just as important as a Triplicate Girl or Bouncing Boy is important?
I think that really comes around in the mid-'70s when relevance hits comics in a few years, speaking at a 1966 perspective, when we start to see things like the appearance of Jon Stewart, when we see Green Lantern and Green Arrow trying to deal with issues of prejudice and racial discrimination, when we see Spider-Man dealing head-on with drug abuse and addiction, when those things start to happen, people start to realize that the things that have been happening to our heroes that are always overturned by the end of the issue, nobody's marriage lasts. Nobody really has a kid. It's all a dream, a hoax, an imaginary story. Or somebody's dead for 3 panels. Yeah, they're dead for 3 panels and then they come back. When that relevance hits, that's the point where people start saying, oh my God, death is important or consequences are important. And so, we see things like we bring back Mr. Terrific to kick off a murder mystery in Justice League, and he dies and he stays dead. But that also comes with the caveat of this is a weird superhero universe and anything can happen. His alternate universe counterpart or his third cousin from France or the new guy wearing his costume will come back in a couple of issues.
I wonder if there is, and I know this is like just a thought experiment. So don't write in podcast@majorspoilers.com and go, come on, Steven, you really believe this? No, but it's a thought experiment. Do you think?
No.
And this is kind of like this is kind of like Fables. Have you read the series Fables from Bill Willingham?
Oh yeah, I love Willingham.
Yeah, so Bill Willingham wrote this series called Fables back in the early 2000s for Vertigo Entertainment or Vertigo Comics, and it was about fairy tales, fables, characters that you've known all your life, the stories that you've grown up with. And the interesting thing is, some of these characters are basically immortal because people keep telling their stories. And as long as the characters' stories are continued to be told, it's harder and harder to kill them.
Yeah,
And
Cinderella in that story is a secret agent who, no matter what happens to her, regenerates because of the pervasiveness of Cinderella in the public consciousness.
And characters like Bigby Wolf also are this way, the Big Bad Wolf, and Snow White. Sister Rose Red, not as
Little
invulnerable.
less so.
Yeah. So I wonder if we could equate that same kind of concept that William created with Fables and apply it to comic books like Superman. Superman's never going to die because he is the god of all superheroes, right? Or I guess you could say there are gods who are actual gods of gods, but Superman would never be able to die. Batman also would be up in there. Green Lantern kind of depends on what Green Lantern you're talking about. Maybe Hal Jordan has a little bit more invulnerability than Kyle Rayner or Jon Stewart, and Wonder Woman certainly would have a lot more power. Then you have two different Flashes. I mean, certainly at this point, DC, we've had the introduction of the multiverse at this point for over a year now. And we have two different Flashes. We have the Golden Age Jay Garrick, and we have the modern Wally West. And we know that DC is looking to modernize their entire comic book line. So you may have characters like Jay Garrick, who's not as popular but still known and well liked, who probably isn't as invulnerable as the venerated Barry Allen. I wonder if those same kind of things would happen to the Legion members. Which Legion members can you not kill, and which Legion members do you kill? And I think in this issue, we have a little bit of an answer in the form of Let's Murder Triplicate Girl. I mean, Computo has decimated Triplicate Girl on the first page, and there's nothing but little grains of dust, and they have to configure a device to say, oh, we will suck the air out and try to find all the little bits of Triplicate Girl, and then we will shoot her into space to Shangri-La, which is seems to be an interesting combination of Shambhala or Shangri-La and Valhalla.
Yep.
And it's this burial planet where all of these dead Legion members go. Things like Beast Boy and Yegor and Mag Yegor and Lita 87 and Hate Face.
Don't forget Hate Face. Such a great hero, Hate Face. I would read a Hate Face comic all day long.
But it seems like, oh, this is it. She's been inscribed in a thing and shot off into space, which actually is kind of a popular thing right now. People want to get buried in space. Scotty, James Doohan, was shot off into space.
No, you're thinking of Spock. They put him in a.
No, I think they did it with Doohan. They did it with Doohan too. When he died, it was at
the end of Wrath of Khan. They put Spock
that
in
too. That's a little more fictionalized burial in space. But I mean, people are literally being shot into space to be buried. But then suddenly we realize, remember, she did turn into Triplicate Girl before Computo grabbed her, and two of her parts were able to get away. And two of her parts show up after the funeral's over, after everyone's dried their eyes and are eating at the buffet. The Triplicate Girl, two of her show up and say, hey, I'm Triplicate Girl number 2. And the other one, I don't know who, she doesn't really introduce herself. She's just like, hey, what's the deal with this funeral thing anyway? And they're like, well, there's only 2 of me now. I guess we can't call me Triplicate Girl. I guess we'll have to call myself Duo Damsel.
Yeah.
Which is
not as good a name.
No, it's definitely not as good a name. But Duo Damsel, I mean, for the next
30 years.
30 years. Yeah, 30 years, she is Duo Damsel. Which makes me wonder how those powers work. How the Triplicate Girl... Go ahead.
Targites can split themselves into 3 people. Basically, they can split their body into 3 individual ones.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the thing, and they actually, later on this comes up. It is unusual for one body to die without the others also dying.
Ah.
Through, some sort of, I don't know, law of averages. But that actually is something that does come up, and it becomes part of Triplicate Girl's drama. Is here she puts on this big happy smile, and she's like, I'm Duo Damsel now, tee-hee. And later on down the line, she's like, I was so stupid. I was trying to be so brave, but I was so stupid.
Yeah, this is in 5 years later, where she's smoking cigarettes and doing crack out of the back of the dumpster. My
not
life.
doing crack out of a dumpster. That's just hurtful.
Okay. Now, anyway, I think this is... we've got Computo. We've got Computo killing somebody. We've got Brainiac. We've got the United Planets. We've got Duo Damsel in here. I mean, these two issues have everything in it. They're almost able to defeat, or they are able to defeat Computo. And the icing on the cake, Matthew.
Yes,
Batman. Batman is the icing on the cake. Even we were just talking about, does DC know how important their IPs are? Even in 1966, they realized the way you bring kids into comics is to put a Batman reference in this issue.
Yes, because the Legionnaires need to go to ground. They need to run and hide after the appearance of the greatest Legionnaire of all, the Weirdo
Legionnaire. We'll get to him in a minute.
He, distracts them. The Legionnaires escape. They fly to a weird part of Metropolis, which, by the way, at this point is the entire east coast of the United States.
Right.
Superboy drills underground at Sunboy's command, and Sunboy's like, "This is the Batcave, the secret sanctum of Batman, who became your partner when you grew up to become Superman. Here's a picture of the two of you together," because it's a Jerry Siegel story and exposition is at a premium.
Yeah. Well, on the plus side, by the end of the issue, when Superman's flying back through time, he forgets everything. So it kind of works out.
Well, post-hypnotic suggestion by Supergirl.
The Batcave.
Yes.
The freaking Batcave shows up in a Legion of Superheroes book. Kind of blows your mind.
It does, and it still exists, and it's still filled with his trophies, including we see the Penny Plunderer's giant penny, and we see the robot Tyrannosaurus.
Yep.
And we see a picture of the Joker, which is terrifying.
Oh, always is.
This is extra terrifying, though.
Yeah. This issue also sees, Matthew, the return of Bouncing Boy.
Yes! Bouncing Boy is repowered by Computo, and I'm not exactly sure what Computo was doing when he repowered him, because Bouncing Boy ran up and went, "I lost my power, but if I had it back, I'd fight you." And Computo's
and I think that is,
fight me.
Computo is trying to do away with all emotion. But at that point, it shows that emotion is still controlling him, because he's like, yeah, okay, let's do this, smug little boy. I'm going to give you your power back for the next 30 minutes, and we're going to fight. And then I'm going to see you destroyed, because I am better than you, neener pants.
I am better than you, fat man.
And Bouncing Boy is able to do some cool bouncing tricks that allow other characters, like Colossal Boy, to come in and start smashing and grabbing and destroying all the robots.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, he's still just a thin kid.
He is, and the power wears off, and the Legionnaires are like, "Oh, it's okay, Chuck. We only liked you because your dad had a Camaro."
Yeah, see you later, boy.
Bye. And then Brainiac 5.
What about Brainiac 5?
Brainiac 5 realizes that there's only one possible way to defeat a Computo.
Which is?
Antimatter.
Antimatter. Oh, man, I forgot this part. This is where the Jerry Siegelness of this issue really comes into play. Let's pull a Deus Ex Machina out of the bag and introduce, which I got to double check. When was the Negative Zone introduced in comics in the Fantastic Four?
1965, I want to say.
So just a little bit before this, right? So Brainiac's like, let's fire this antimatter gun at these robots, and this cloud will continue to destroy all matter that it touches until it doesn't anymore. Which, the only matter that it touches are the robots. It's not destroying, like, the city, the ground, the air around them.
Well, no, those aren't matter. Only the robots
it doesn't
matter
for this story. Waka,
well, that's what they're saying. It's antimatter, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess. Save the day, the end, Superboy goes home.
It's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, basically.
Why do you have Super Turtle down?
Because in the middle of issue 341, there's a Super Turtle short. Just all of a sudden there.
Okay.
We've got Super Turtle. And I'm like, yeah, Super Turtle. Yeah, screw this big Legion epic. I want to read about Super Turtle. He doesn't want to get his cape wet. He's a turtle who is super, Steven.
We need to talk about the Weirdo Legionnaire. This is the secret weapon that the Legion has kept into play that no one knows about. Not even all of the Computo banks in all of the world. None of the Encyclopedia Britannicas that Computo has flipped through contain information about the Weirdo Legionnaire.
That's correct.
What's the Weirdo Legionnaire's story?
He is such a secret weapon that he has actually erased his memory. The very memory of his existence has been blocked out of the other Legionnaires' minds until the worst happens. And he has an incredible mystery power that
All right, what's
no
his
one.
mystery power?
Well, first of all, you have to understand how the weirdo Legionnaire looks. He's got 3 heads.
Uh-huh.
He's got Aquaman pants with big kind of Loch Ness monster webbing. He has 4 steel extensible arms that look like slinkies, one of which has a powerful ray gun of some sort. And he is immune, seemingly, to Computo's frap guns because Computo zaps him with a Z-ray and he just regenerates. It's almost as if he's not really a person, but some sort of animated blob of protoplasm.
It's almost like at the very beginning of the issue, Chameleon Boy shows up at Brainiac's lab, and Brainiac's like, "Hey, I told you guys to scram out of here. I'm busy, see?"
Yeah,
and Chameleon Boy's like, "Look, I'm here to pick up somebody that's already in there that you didn't know was in there." And he goes in, and one of the devices on the table suddenly turns into Prody. And Prody's like, "I'm communicating telepathically with you, Chameleon Boy. I just wanted to spend time with Brainiac because I love him.
I am Prody, and I exist, and this is my powers, and this is how you know that I am the Deus Ex Machina."
And, well, is Prody the Deus Ex Machina, or is he just the Deus Ex MacGuffin?
Prody is definitely my favorite part of this issue, and perhaps my favorite part of really all Legion issues ever. As Weirdo Legionnaire, I mean. But the Prody thing is actually, to me at least, relatively skillfully done. Because we see it at the beginning of issue 340, and they're like, okay, you guys remember? Everybody got that? But it's done in a way that's relatively subtle so that when we get to the point where the Legion attacks, and by the way, 2 pages before, you see Chameleon Boy standing with a big Prody 2 on his shoulder. So that everybody knows that, man, that's a big Prody 2.
Yep.
And then Prody 2, using his shape-shifting abilities, saves the day. Basically, the Weirdo Legionnaire is Black Ops psychology stuff to freak out. And, of course, then they follow that up with they may actually preview that with the existence of Bizarro Computo.
Yep.
Or Otupmok.
Which is a Bizarro Computer is just, where Computo is wires and switches and metal and anger. Bizarro Computo is like cardboard box with kids crayon all over it.
I love you.
2 + 2 is I'm too stupid.
Me stir this. Hello.
Which again, at this point in the book, it kind of loses me. Only because it's like we are throwing one stupid idea after another stupid idea after another stupid idea. We got the Weirdo Legionnaire. Then we've got the Bizarro Computo. Then we've got Antimatter. Then we've got Colossal. I mean, it's just like, let's keep building it and building it and building it and building it and building it until all the kids reading these comics at home are like, oh, I had nachos and ice cream. I shouldn't have done that.
But it really does. To me, at least, this feels like the prototypical map for modern big epic storytelling. You keep upping the ante. And even though Siegel had to do it in 20 pages, and some of the things that he upped the ante with were, I don't want to say dumb, but yeah, I'll say dumb.
Not great. We can say not great.
I like the idea of Bizarro Computo, not because it's a good idea or because it's funny, but because it is something established in Legion lore. It's an established part of Superman history that they're using as a last-ditch effort.
Right.
It's something that ties into previous issues and previous stories and does something we didn't necessarily expect. It would be the equivalent of, having a villain show up and suddenly it turns out it's Mixelplick. Oh, wait, that's later. That's way later.
That's coming up. Don't worry.
We'll
Don't
get
worry,
there.
kids. Yeah.
We'll get there.
So by the end, everything works out. We've lost 1/3 of Triplica Girl. She now goes by Duo Damsel. So we get that introduction in issue 341, but I think that there's also another significant, important factor coming down the road because this issue also includes the return of Bouncing Boy.
Yes. Even though it's only temporary, Bouncing Boy is back and makes an effort to be a part of the Legion in this story, and he'll be back soon.
And if you want to go even further down the line, Bouncing Boy Duo damsel. Maybe a wedding in their future.
Maybe in Super Legion of Superheroes number 200.
Here's the other thing is this is, normally you get part 1, part 2 in a story. We have seen some issues carry over. This is such a big, crazy, over-the-top story. It almost feels like this book should have waited till like issue 350 or something. 340 doesn't feel like that milestone that you celebrate. But like issue 350, that would be like a milestone you could celebrate and use this tale in issues like 349 and 350.
But that
to bring it all together.
That milestone storytelling model really doesn't come around until the 80s.
Right?
Which I'm sort of fine with. I like the fact that 341 is a big, dangerous, scary issue because it means that the danger doesn't just pop up every 25 issues whenever we hit a round number. It's nice to have this just sort of come at you out of nowhere. To Brainiac 5 is going, derp, 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 I'm working for the United Planets. Oh, crap, I created the devil. And the robot devils come to kill. Oh, and he killed one of us. And she stays dead at the end of the issue, which is rare enough, even in 1966, that you have to think, this is kind of a game changer. And in a lot of ways, it's a subtle game changer. But this is really the Legion epic. This is the blueprint for the Great Darkness saga. This is the blueprint for, by extension, the Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is the blueprint in a lot of ways for what big, giant, mega epic stories will become. And they did it in 40 pages with a Super Turtle backup.
Yep. They do win the day. Computo does go down going, but I only wanted to learn what love was. And then he blows up in a bunch of sparks. However, this is not the last time we will see Computo appear in the Legion of Superheroes.
Oh, God, no.
We can go forward all the way to 1982? 1982. One Daniel Foucault, or Foucault.
It's very French. They are French. It's a Foucault.
She is a member of the Legion of Superheroes who goes by the name. She's also isn't she? She was originally the Invisible Kid, but then goes by the name.
Invisible Kid is her brother.
Oh, right. And then gets her name the Computo because she's a computer whiz.
She actually was possessed by the spirit of a Computo.
Mm-hmm.
The actual evil Computo that we see in this issue, who looks like a Fisher-Price toy, comes back from the dead and manages to take over her mind with the evil powers of AI.
She has the ability to communicate with and control computers of all kinds by personally interacting with them. Hey there, computer. How are you doing today? Yeah? Tell me about it. I don't suppose that you could do a J-string query for me, could you? Yeah, I know you could. Good job.
Don't do that. I'm uncomfortable. I need an adult.
She pops up in the 5 years later, or she's around in the 5 years later. She's shortly in the post-zero hour.
She's part of the Legionnaires team post-zero hour, the SW6 Legion.
And then also in some Infinite Crisis shenanigans, she pops up. And I think that's about it, right?
I don't think she comes back in any of the other iterations of the team because Jacques, the second Invisible Kid, is very rarely seen because when
he's invisible.
When they resurrect Invisible Kid, the first Invisible Kid, Lyle Norg, he never dies again.
Oh, he's a zombie.
I'm not saying he dies in this original story. Stick around for another 45 episodes.
I will get to all this eventually. Don't worry. But overall, for these two issues, man, I love these two issues. As much as I love the Death of Lightning Lad, those two are, I would put those as number one, that grouping of comics is number one Legion story. And this is my number two Legion story.
This is a good one. And the fact that it has swan interiors makes it that much more memorable because I do love John Fort, don't get me wrong, but there's something about the facial expressions and the body language in this issue that really gives that, oh my God, Triplicate Girl died. Oh my God, what are we going to do? It gives it a little extra heft that you might not have gotten with a stiff John Fort figure with their faces that do not move.
Matthew, we have reached the end of another Legion Clubhouse. And before we get to the part about what we learned today, I want to talk to our listeners directly.
Okay.
Hey,
hi, listeners. How you doing?
It's
Oh,
me, Steven
yeah.
Schleicher. Over there, Matthew Peterson.
What up?
And in this third season, we've only got one more episode left. And we really want to continue the Legion Clubhouse, and we want to continue to bring you this fun each and every week. However, it does cost us to do this. And if you enjoy this show, we're asking you to pledge your support. And the easiest way to do that is to go to patreon.com/majorspoilers and sign up for as little as $2. You know, if we had every single listener of the Legion Clubhouse pledge $2 over at patreon.com/majorspoilers, we would definitely hit our next 2 goals that we need to hit in order to keep this show alive. So, if you would, go to patreon.com/majorspoilers. And, dear listener, we want to continue to bring this show to you, and I think with your help, we can do that. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Matthew, what did we learn this week?
Well, we learned that computers is robots and robots is evil, and that's just bad.
We also learned that death is not dead.
And most importantly, we learned that if you get on Brainiac 5's nerves, he will tear you a new one.
That wraps it up for this installment of the Legion Clubhouse. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. We'll be back next time. Oh, man, next time. The Legionnaire who killed. Cannot wait to get to talk to you about that. And until then, I'm See You Later Boy.
And I'm Razor Scuto.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2018 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.